Good morning and welcome to OTB AM on this Friday morning. Adrian with you, and Eoin Shane is back in studio after his week-long junket in sunny Lisboa. Welcome back, Eoin.
Well, it's very disrespectful to describe it as a junket, but thank you very much for having me back.
I thought you were going to say disrespectful to say it was sunny when the weather was pretty crap. Is that right?
It was, yeah. It was lashing rain for quite a bit there, much like it was over here, I understand.
Yeah, it hasn't been great, yeah. So we're off to a flyer with the weather update.
Well, you brought it up.
Fair enough, fair shout. So the junket was good?
Yeah, it was good. Fantastic hard work.
You were at a game, you were soaking up some beer.
Hard work, as I say. If you're not going to come back without a full 360 cultural experience, then why would you bother going in the first place?
Well, you're using expressions like 360 cultural experience, having just come back from the Web Summit. I think that sort of tells you.
It was a bespoke trip.
Was it? Yeah. What does that mean?
I have no idea.
You got to speak to some interesting people, it turns out.
Yeah, very interesting people. It is sort of like the overall sort of a glance into the future when it comes to all areas other than sport, where kind of trends are moving in terms of big business.
Things are trending in the right direction, are they?
I think so.
Generally.
In general, really, in this studio, in this conversation, things are definitely trending in the right direction. There's no question about that. But also, when it comes to sport, you definitely kind of see, well, what's going to be the next big thing? And we've definitely been speaking about it on this show over the past couple of months and beyond, about, like, say, for example, something like esports. Will it actually become something of the future? Will it actually become a part that's ingrained in, say, Irish sporting culture? And it seems to certainly be a huge thing abroad, which we already knew, to be fair, but it's huge to the point that people are talking about it in ways that we talk about other sports. I stumbled upon one talk where there was two people on stage arguing about which drugs esports players are using. How are they doping? How are they bending the rules? And I was like, hold on a minute, esports athletes are doping, and it turns out that amphetamines are the drugs of choice. EPO and testosterone not so much, because obviously it's not a physical sport, but mentally the amphetamines will help you out quite a bit. So basically, if you want to be the next top esports athlete, Adrian, get on those amphetamines.
Oh, there's so many things from what you've just said there. Esport athlete.
Well, I guess you got to give them that title.
Are you coining them that, or is that what they're actually called?
I don't know.
Because athlete definitely does
esports participant. Let's go with that.
I'm okay with that, yeah. I mean, there is a sort of our own Enda has done a piece this week it's up on our YouTube channel with any sport athlete, if we're going that way, from the US, I think it was this week. And
top FIFA player, yeah.
Top FIFA, top, I understand, from everything I can gather.
I'm enjoying your tone here towards esports.
There would be, I can imagine there would be a temptation to get involved in a bit of sort of amphetamines or something that would kind of beef you up in a way as well, because, like, you know, this guy's obviously, the guy that he was talking to was involved with Red Bull New York, I'm going to say off the top of my head, totally unfounded, but he's actually affiliated with the club anyway.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was talking about what good mates he is with all the players of the club, and how they see him we're on an even keel here, me and you. This is a coming together of colleagues who are at an equal level. I mean, I'd like to hear from the players to hear what their actual take on this guy was, but I can see why he might actually want to beef himself up in a way that's good for his brand and allows him to sort of saunter around beside these other actual athletes and not look like a total couch slob like me.
Well, that's an incredible angle to take on what I've just said. That you were saying that they're doping to look good.
No, I said I could see why they might.
I didn't say I said couch potatoes.
I can see why they might. No, because it's
unbelievable.
The whole point being that they're not in comparisons to couch potatoes. They're in comparison to actual athletes.
Okay, fair enough.
Like if you're sauntering around the sort of canteen at Red Bull Salzburg or whichever one of the Red Bulls he's at, and you've got all these, like, it's fine when we're walking around and you're looking at me and I'm looking at you, and Tommy's probably the outlier and you know, somebody who's actually sort of a half bit of an athlete, but generally around here we look at each other, nobody has to feel too bad because everyone's in equally poor shape. Sorry for dragging you down with the rest of us, right? But that's sort of the reality of things. So what I'm saying
they're giving themselves a mental boost by looking better than their opponent.
No, what I'm saying is nothing to do with his opponent, more that he's looking around the canteen and he's seeing all these sculpted athletes and he's like, oh, maybe I need to look like this.
Right. Well, that's an interesting opinion. It's not something I certainly agree with. But just a final point on this as well. Apparently they're all retiring at a very young age. If I was an esports gamer, I'd be retired by now due to multiple factors. One of those factors is just a lack of reaction time. So apparently I've already lost it. As a 21-year-old, you start to lose your reaction times, especially if you've been playing games for as long as these kids have. And second of all...
So playing the games assist you in losing it. Right.
Of course it is. It's like
I would have had it keeps you sharp.
Your joints wear yourself down after decades and decades of playing football. But when you're practicing esports, you're playing at a high intensity all the time, not just when you're competing, which is the exact opposite of our kind of traditional professional sports. And second of all, the sleep deprivation over a period of years actually kills your reaction time as well and kills your ability to perform at the highest level. Because these kids are playing for up to, in some occasions, 18 hours per day, every single day, 365 days a year. So that was kind of a worrying sign for me because, you know, in the mornings here, we do suffer from a small bit of sleep deprivation sometimes. So I expect my reaction times to dwindle over the next couple of years. That's it, and that's all I have to say about that. I'm sure you'll find some patronising...
that's all I have to say.
I'm sure you'll find some patronising way of talking about
this
that.
Conversation's over now, by the way. I've sort of exhausted. I've been on a junket for the weekend. So I'm exhausted.
No, go on. By all means, go and patronise the sport again.
What are you saying that drugs they're taking?
Amphetamines.
Just to keep them awake, is that the...
keeps them awake, improves reaction times. You've got a bigger alertness with amphetamines in your system. Right. I haven't tried them, but I'll certainly look at it.
So friends have told you this is... Well, acquaintances, people you've met.
No, the professionals on stage, as I said at the start of the conversation.
Okay, I'm just interrogating the topic on. That's my job here, so that's what's going on. No,
well, you've interrogated it very, very successfully.
This guy that Endo was speaking to sort of to get away from the game, he goes and plays actual football. Right,
well, he's a much more healthy human being than most of his colleagues. Is what I'm sure you're going to say next.
I'm going to say anything of the sort. Right, that's sort of where we're at for the minute. We've loads of good stuff coming your way over the next hour and a little bit, and here's a bit of a flavour of it. We're going to bring you some interesting stuff from the back pages, including Declan Rice has spoken. Let's see what he has to say in just a few minutes' time. He will take you inside those back pages as well, with a little bit more detail on those at about 8 o'clock. Anastasia Ashley has been speaking to Eoin over the course of the week. He had many interesting conversations. And John?
Yeah, why? What's
I'm just saying, you actually did some work. That's at some point or another.
Why is that not the form for off the ball on a junket? Because I was certainly
100%. That's, you haven't read the script. That's exactly the way it works.
I mean, I could have got away with so much more.
Darren Cleary is going to be in to let us know what's happening in the world of live sport. That is about just after 8:30 or thereabouts, and always, as always, on a Friday. Alan Quinlan is going to be in studio, and with some big international rugby obviously to look ahead to this weekend. So all that coming your way over the next little while. And I need to remind you as well that we've a very special competition for you today, because we have a roadshow upcoming next Tuesday night, November the 13th, at a very special Off the Ball roadshow. It's in association with Heineken Rugby Club, and it's at the Olympia next Tuesday night, just a few days out, of course, from the All Blacks game. Joining Joe on the night are going to be Brian O'Driscoll and Keith Wood, as always, and on stage alongside them is going to be our own Quinny. The New Zealand legend Justin Marshall is going to be there, and our very special guest Paul O'Connell completing the lineup. So tickets for that event are now totally sold out, so tickets not to be got anywhere else, but we do have some very, very important tickets. That's VVIPs to give away today to one lucky viewer of OTB AM. Best seats in the house, a meet and greet with all our special guests after the show, and if you're very lucky, we'll get your photograph with them as well. And for VVIP, we're going to give you a very special off-air Q&A with Quinny pre-show. So all of that is in the melting pot. We're just looking for the best comments and questions over the course of the next hour and a little bit. Wherever you happen to be watching us this morning, leave a comment on the hashtag OTBAM or on any of our platforms, and Tommy's going to pick out the best one before the end of the show, and you will be joining us at the Olympia next Tuesday night. So it's as simple as that, and if you miss out on that, you can check out HeinekenRugbyClub.com for more chances to win. Always drink responsibly, and visit drinkaware.ie for more. Right, time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Right, it's 5 to 8 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us. Do keep your comments coming into us over the next little while. Here's a look what's happening on the back pages this morning. We're going to get into some of these in a little bit more detail. And draw your attention over here to Rice toiling over hardest decision. We've been calling out for Declan Rice to speak for some time, and he has at last spoken to the Times. So we're going to bring you the details of exactly what it is he's saying. Spoiler alert, it's not that fascinating. That's coming your way in just a few minutes' time. FA looks into abuse aimed at James McLean. This is news that the FA are going to revisit that case of, as James McLean calls it, sectarian abuse against the player. The Irish Times this morning is all about the rugby with a big weekend ahead. Ireland ready for Argentina onslaught, writes Jerry Thornley here, and Finlay Beelum, Noel Scanlon, Dave Kilcoyne enjoying their work there. And McCaw says Schmidt would face stiff competition if he targets the New Zealand job. So, yeah, there's just a bunch of commentary from Richie McCaw, who's been doing some interview work over the last 24, 48 hours, and there's various takes on that. Exact story, Schmidt to New Zealand over the course of a lot of the newspapers. Solid foundations, writes the Examiner this morning. O'Brien returns as big guns roll out for Argentina. And we got a good shot of the Irish scrum squaring up there, training during the week. Ronan O'Gara's take inside as well. And finally from me for the minute, it is Joe Schmidt, the man of the moment here, suited and booted for the Puma test as he picks up a Distinguished Fellowship award at Griffith College, and he seems to be enjoying himself there as well. Everyone's hoping that Schmidt comes back home, says McCaw here. A slightly different take from one of our earlier versions there, writes David Kelly in the Irish Independent. North Boss O'Neill sees the funny side of Jimmy Dunn's call-up, so we'll have more details on all of those upcoming.
From one distinguished fellow to another, it's Eddie Jones on the back of the Irish Daily Mail. Jones's sly dig reads the headline. England boss reopens old Sexton wounds, says Rory Keane. So excuse me, Eddie Jones has been speaking about Owen Farrell's injury that he's been nursing this week after the Springboks game last week, and he says that if he was Johnny Sexton, then we'd be able to complain about him, but because he's Owen Farrell, he's allowed to be hit late. He gets up and he plays on. He'll be like that this week. So it's not the first time that Eddie Jones has had a small bit of a pop against Johnny Sexton. Also there on the back page of the Mail is McLean knows he was wrong, says Rowett. That's in relation to James McLean calling a section of their supporters cavemen, says Gary Rowett. Back page of the Herald is Celtic have high hoops. Euro dreams are still alive after Thriller at Parkhead. You know, to some people that would be very, very offensive to say that they have a high hoop, but Celtic certainly have them. They won last night. They beat RB Leipzig.
Got a high hoop. I've heard of somebody that had that before. It was apparently you can take amphetamines for it. It's this is the only treatment for a high hoop.
The hoop will only get higher with amphetamines, is what I've heard. The back page of the Mirror is you've been warned. Schmidt tells his star names that they are no certain to be chosen to face All Blacks. Nobody is safe in that Ireland squad at the moment. And Pellegrini saying that Rice will get better. We'll return to the Declan Rice situation in just a moment. Back page of the Sun then, Callum on over. Wilson cherry-picked. So England new boy Callum Wilson is a £35 million target for Chelsea, which would be an interesting signing for them in January. He seems to be hitting his best form once again after that terrible injury not too long ago. And speaking of serious injuries, you can see Danny Welbeck there. Welbeck horror, injured seriously last night in that they'd all draw at Sporting Lisbon. We'll see the full extent of that, no doubt, in the next 24 hours or so. Back page of the Irish Daily Star this morning is Hypocrites. Lennon slams the double standards over Mourinho antics. So he's been speaking about José Mourinho after Gary Caldwell claimed that Lennon brings a lot of it on himself with relation to some of the controversy he's been involved with. And he says that we speak about José Mourinho in a very different way in terms of the way that he perhaps go to the crowd against Juventus at the weekend, or in midweek I should say. Back page of The Guardian is Jones puts faith in Farrell. Warrior fly half will face the All Blacks despite fitness fears. And Welbeck blow sours night for Arsenal. Striker suffers horror injury during Europa League match with Sporting, while Giroud's rare goal fires Chelsea into the last 32. And then finally, the Daily Telegraph sports section has gone with Ton-Up Jennings. Born-again batsman scores unbeaten. First Test century in 2 years to put England on top in Sri Lanka.
All right, here's what we're going to bring you inside the back pages on. We're going to talk about that Declan Rice article, give you some more details on that. We have Eddie Jones' comments on Johnny Sexton. That's some interesting stuff from him. We've also got that Jose Pep sliding doors.
Not Pepe, obviously. But I would read a Pepe sliding door story with Jose Mourinho. But
interesting Xavi comments in there as well. The Premier League race at the bottom, there's a pretty tight squeeze at the bottom, so Stuart James writes about that in The Guardian this morning. And GA jobs and experience, it turns out that it is a country for all men after all, so that's a bit of a flavour of what's happening inside the back pages, and we're going to get you some detail on those. Now, Declan Rice, we've been sort of talking about this for the last while. It's a bit of a scoop from the Times, the London edition essentially, which appears in the Ireland edition obviously this morning as well. We've been saying for the last while that, you know, the one thing this story needs now is for Declan Rice to speak, because that's going to move the story on. It really hasn't, is kind of the short story. It's Declan Rice, not particularly interrogated. I don't know the context of the interview or exactly how it's come about, if it's a press conference or whatever.
It was for a charity initiative that Declan Rice is involved with people with disabilities in his local community.
Yeah, so it hasn't, he hasn't been, I suppose, he's talking to Gary Jacob in this piece, and, it's one of the hardest decisions I'll ever have to make is the headline out of it, so that will kind of give you a bit of an idea as to the salaciousness or otherwise of the article. There's very little in it, really, other than to say that it's been a bit of a tug of war for him. He's met Martin O'Neill, and Martin O'Neill was very impressive, and he called over to his parents' house and he impressed him, and we'd spoken about this on the show only a few weeks back, that I certainly would have made the point that I'd like to have Martin O'Neill in my corner in that regard, that I think actually he can be, when he wants to be, an impressive communicator, and I can easily see how he might be able to sort of win somebody over in that way. And he speaks about Gareth Southgate being equally impressive. He speaks about the influence that John Terry has had in his career. I'd actually sort of built up in my mind, at least anyway, some sort of an impression that himself and John Terry were kind of best buddies, but it isn't really that at all. It's like, we text each other once every 6 months or whatever. He came through the Chelsea Academy, and Terry was obviously the club captain at the time, would have taken an interest in him given his position. And even when he got let off, Terry comes over to the house and sort of says, listen, gives him a 45-minute pep talk about keep your eye on the prize. This isn't done for you. You'll have a long career if you keep at it. So that sort of positive influence. But just in terms of the Ireland thing, really, it doesn't move the story forward at all, I would suggest.
No, not at all. It just kind of illuminates a little bit more how important it is to the Rice family, how important it is to his father, his association with Ireland. He says that he's got all his caps framed in the house. He says that family back home and stuff are eager and are very proud of him wearing the green jersey. But obviously he says that it's a big decision for him to make. As you say, the John Terry stuff is the most interesting thing in the piece. Like, did you really think John Terry was somebody who cared too deeply about some kid who got let go from the academy?
I've absolutely... that was not a surprise to me.
Right, okay.
Like, I know there's a perception obviously out there about John Terry, and to be fair to him, he does a lot to support that perception at times. But there are people, if you listen to them, Pat Nevin particularly is one of them, who will tell you that as a human being, he has things to recommend him. And clearly that aspect of it is one as well. And
it harbours well for John Terry as a potential manager, hearing stuff like that, hearing the idea that he cares clearly about a would-be teammate on a human level. That Declan Rice growing up, I guess he probably had an appreciation that this kid Declan Rice viewed him as one of his idols as a young footballer. He talks about Sergio Ramos being one of his idols as well. Now, I'm not so sure if Sergio Ramos would pick up the phone or even call over to the house, say if things were different and he was in the Madrid Academy, to actually go and say, listen man, you are going to be fine, you just need to keep up the confidence. But John Terry, it seems, is the type of person who would do that. So fair play to him is all I can say about that. But as you say, when it comes to Ireland, still very much in the dark. But then again, the dark is a better place to be than this universe where Declan Rice is an England player. It gives us this little bit of hope.
It does. It definitely does. I just think that the longer it goes on, obviously he's got a window through which he's got to remain out of the international scene if he is going to declare for England. And this is his inaction is ultimately filling that gap one way or the other. So for me, the longer it goes on, it seemed as if a few weeks ago there'd been some sort of an exclusive, one of the newspapers that said he is actually going to declare for England now. I mean, if you want to be uber optimistic, you can read that article today and sort of leave it with a sense of, well, maybe this guy's still on the fence. I'm really not convinced.
The thing about it, though, is that, and it's only a small thing, what we've heard from Declan Rice speaking in the past has always been via Irish journalists. When he said, I'm very proud to represent Ireland, a few months ago. Maybe he was saying that because he heard Irish accents everywhere in the mix zone, and he was kind of beefing it up a small bit. But really, in this situation, I'd imagine at that event yesterday, it's all English journalists. He wouldn't be as guarded as he usually would. So I don't think he's trying to give us some sort of cloud of optimism and trying to be a little bit more coy than he really is. I take this at face value that there really is still a decision to be made.
The one quote that stood out for me here in terms of that specific aspect of it, so he talks about, without a doubt, not an easy decision. One of the hardest decisions we'll have to make in my career. Let's face it, it's the hardest decision he's going to have to make in his career, whatever he does at club level. But even whatever he does at club level, they're just decisions that players will have to make all the time in terms of, if I stay at this club, I go, I want an increase, I get whatever it is. Like, this is going to be the biggest decision that he's going to make. Martin was excellent when he came to my house, and Gareth was excellent with me, and they both understand the position I'm in. I said I just need some time, as if I'm going to be playing for the rest of my career. I need to make the right decision. What's best for me and my family? They were both great, to be fair. I told both managers that I'm just focusing on playing for West Ham at the moment, as that was on the back of a good last season. He says, being 19 and playing as many games as I have, I never thought I would be in a position to make such a hard decision. Well, you could really read into that, obviously, in a way that says, I never thought that I would be on England's radar to have to make this decision.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably true, isn't it? He probably did hope one day, like when John Terry's calling around to your house and saying you're going to be okay, like surely you're thinking to yourself, well, I can still make it to a pretty high level.
I think if you've let go by you're let go by the Chelsea academy, any international.
I'm sure
potential.
Terry was saying to him that the academy is not the be all and end all of everybody's career. In fact, who knows where Declan Rice might have been if the Chelsea academy had kept him. Chances are, at this juncture in his career, at 19 years old, he would not be in as good a position as he is now. Leaving that Chelsea academy and getting an opportunity elsewhere was probably the best thing that ever happened to Declan Rice in the short term. Maybe in the long term he would have broken through into the first team, but that certainly wouldn't have happened until he was 22.
Yeah, he does talk about the sort of, which is an interesting theme that's taken up by Robbie Henshaw in the papers today, about that sort of positional thing as well, about where he's best suited to, whether it's at centre back or whether it's that holding midfield position. So I suppose we'll see over the next while, but there's nothing sort of no great revelations in that piece this morning. It's not really advancing the story in any fantastic way. He's still on the fence. Short story.
Yeah. Eddie Jones as well is in the
Speaking of people on the fence.
Speaking of people on the fence, Jones a sly dig, as we said a moment ago, about Johnny Sexton. So he's kind of reopened the old Sexton wounds. Just to repeat what was said, he's been speaking about Owen Farrell and his recovery from a hip injury, about whether or not he'll be fit and whether or not how his fitness is progressing. And basically he says that if he was Johnny Sexton, then we'd be able to complain about him in terms of his treatment against the Springboks last week. But because he's Owen Farrell, he's allowed to be hit late. He gets up and he plays on. He'll be like that this week. So it's not even, I was going to say it's a veiled dig. It's not a veiled dig at all. It's a clear dig at Johnny Sexton. To be fair, if you're an England rugby supporter and you're reading that this morning, you're like, good on you, Eddie Jones. Good on you in creating some sort of siege mentality in terms of making the headlines talk about injustice from a referee standpoint against England, because when it comes to the best team in the world, what do they have going for them? They've got referees who, when it comes to the on-defence decisions, they're often coming down on the All Black side on these on-defence decisions. So getting the officials on your side and particularly pushing them away from, say, Irish favouritism, if that's what he thinks, that's surely a positive thing from England rugby's point of view. If
I'm an England rugby supporter this morning, I'm like, Eddie Jones, shut your trap, get out and win some games and then get back. Those sort of comments are absolutely fine when England are winning, and when they're losing, he looks just... I struggle to find the positive in Eddie Jones, I have to say, on a very consistent basis.
And I think that's why you're saying what you just said about Eddie Jones. Take away the idea that he's Eddie Jones and say it's just say it was Joe Schmidt in a position where Ireland are in a pretty bad run of form and they've had a bad calendar year, and Johnny Sexton has got hit late, he's carrying a bit of a knock, hasn't really been anything done, and across the water you've got Owen Farrell, who's getting away with things, in your view, who's getting away with things a lot more than your out half is. What are you going to say? Of course you're going to stick up for your out half. Of course you're going to say that the whole world is against us, because when it comes to these sort of things, the idea of a siege mentality works.
Yeah. Of all the players to be saying that the whole world is against us at the minute, Owen Farrell definitely has had not much of a case, given what he's been over the last couple of weeks.
Not a case at all, I would say.
That's some context to it, but ultimately I think you're right. There's definitely a bit of the José Mourinho's about it. Is this constant whinging and moaning from a guy that at times shows a lack of class, to use that word that's been sort of bandied about in the week about Mourinho as well, that why pull Sexton into it? There's nothing to do with it. It's not no Ireland, England on the radar anytime soon, Eddie. Put that in your back pocket and save it for another time. It's the constant, it's the regularity of the whinginess.
Well, maybe when you say put it in your back pocket and save it for another time, maybe we'll be talking about these quotes before the next England game. Maybe he'll be very thankful for the idea that he had this in his back pocket for another time.
Eddie Jones is going to limp his way onto the World Cup, is what's going to happen. And if results recently are anything to go by, they're going to have an absolute nightmare, and he's going to go on his Murray way afterwards and sort of take up a club role somewhere that people don't have to listen to him.
And it sounds like he'll be pretty happy about that. I kind of like having Eddie Jones up here in the Northern Hemisphere. I like him being in the same news cycle that Ireland are in quite often, particularly around the Six Nations.
I enjoyed that for about 2 weeks, and then it was just a pain in the arse.
Yeah, pain in the arse is sometimes an entertaining thing if it's not in your own country.
I've had too many pains in the arse that have been entertaining.
Well, like in terms of it not being your own pain in the arse, it's affecting England, not us. Like he is single-handedly causing headlines like this. We are talking about an England head coach as having a lack of class. Like I don't know. I think that it's all well and good. It's all pretty fun at the moment. If we were losing to England now and we were ranked lower than them and we didn't feel supremely confident to beat them in any game, any day of the week, then I think we might view them in a very different way. But there's a bit of a joke shop going on in the RFU and with Eddie Jones at the moment. And I think we need to enjoy this joke shop while the doors are open and all guests are accepted.
Right, what else have you got for us?
We've got Jose and Pep Guardiola, of course, going head-to-head this weekend in the Premier League. It is the Manchester derby. Interesting piece done in the Mirror this morning, but it really kind of comes from the new Barcelona documentary, which Graham Hunter, of course, is involved in. And Xavi has been speaking about José Mourinho because, of course, Xavi would have worked with Jose for a brief period when Jose was in with Bobby Robson at Barcelona and Xavi was in the academy. They talk about the sliding doors moment, which came after Frank Rijkaard left Barcelona and the Barcelona hierarchy had to choose, and they were either going to go for Pep Guardiola or they were going to go for Jose Mourinho. And it felt that Jose Mourinho would have been the choice were it not for the way his style changed at Chelsea, which is kind of an important thing to say. So Xavi says Mourinho helped us a lot when we were young players. Possession, holding onto the ball, positional play, we worked on all of that with Mourinho. But when he went to Chelsea, his philosophy of the game changed. He then talks about several directors remaining intent on appointing Mourinho after Rijkaard and says it was a long process because there were board members who wanted Jose. They argued that we needed to appoint a manager who would get results quickly. Unfortunately, however, it was the opinion of club legend Johan Cruyff which swung the decision in Guardiola's favour. We wanted to stay faithful to Cruyff's philosophy. I asked if Pep was ready, and Johan, who saw him regularly, said he was, said one of the Barcelona chiefs. So imagine how different the world of football would be if Jose Mourinho had actually picked up that Barcelona job. Where would Pep Guardiola have gone? Probably he would have gone to become a very successful manager, might have gone to Italy, might have gone to a different club in Spain first and built his way up. But certainly from a Jose Mourinho standpoint and from a Barcelona standpoint, the world would be a vastly different place. And really, what would have changed it? It would have been the perception of Jose Mourinho which would have changed this. They were just concerned about him going to a far more rigid style of play after Porto when he went in with Chelsea, and that's essentially what affected his chances of getting the Barcelona job. Would he have taken the Barcelona job, though, at a time when things were going okay from a Chelsea is an entirely different thing.
Another question, yeah. It's always felt like having missed out that job was a bit of a chip in the shoulder for Mourinho. Like he is that sort of guy who needs a bit of a reason to get up in the morning and sort of prove somebody wrong, I suppose. It has sort of felt, I would think, that it was a bit of a driving factor for him. Interesting to hear Xavi say that he was very good with the young players. Like it's something that he maybe needs to work on a little bit at the minute. That there's such an amount of conversation in the off-season about whether Martial and Rashford would even be at the club this season, and like United has always been that club that has sort of brought young players through and has built a lot of their success around that, while spending obviously the best part of £1 billion on accumulating a squad elsewhere as well. But maybe that's an area that he's been a bit deficient on over the last little while, actually.
Well, that's the thing. I think you take the then Jose Mourinho in Chelsea, and he has regressed stylistically, not hugely. Results-wise, obviously, he's regressed a tiny bit, but that's only been a very recent thing. But certainly when it comes to young players, he's abandoned that theory. And maybe it was he became indoctrinated in the ways of Roman Abramovich, that he thought to himself, well, this whole idea of having an opportunity in 21st century football to develop a young squad and to develop stars for the future is just not an option. This is not the way football is played anymore. We need results, and we need them now. And I often think it's very interesting when you look at the context of Jose Mourinho's career in the context of Pep Guardiola's career, and you look at the moment when, the last time before now when they were both managing in the same league, which was of course in La Liga. I really think that Jose Mourinho, as Real Madrid manager at that time, saw himself as the antithesis of Pep Guardiola, or began to see himself as the antithesis of Pep Guardiola, and his belief that football should be played in a rigid way where results always come first was actually hardened during his time in Spain. It wasn't because it was his philosophy,
it was because he needed to be anti-Pep.
Exactly, that's what I think, and I think that just adds an intrigue to this rivalry, and it is a rivalry obviously we're going to see this weekend, and I think it is the first time that we can really be intrigued by a Manchester United-Manchester City game during the José Pep era. And that's said with the gift of hindsight, because in previous years it's been like, well, this is going to be amazing, and it's always underwhelmed. But I think half of that is because of a perfect dovetail of form, where Manchester City have always been on the rise and Manchester United have always had their struggles. We'll only know really after Sunday how real the renaissance is in Manchester United. I do suspect that it's a false dawn. But there is the fact of the matter is that they've just beaten Juventus. They've just come through a tough battle at the Vitality Stadium where they won in the last minute of the game, and you can't overestimate how much that does for a dressing room. So I'm hopeful that we're finally going to get a good José Pep ding-dong battle in the Premier League.
That's why you're whelmed, essentially.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm overwhelmed.
You're not underwhelmed or overwhelmed, you're just whelmed.
Yeah, okay, let's go with that. I'm whelmed.
I'm not sure, though. I have to say,
I'm trying to pick this up.
There to be optimistic, and do tune in for commentary of the game right here on Off the Ball on Sunday. But having said all of that, like, you'd be surprised if City don't win it. Yeah,
you would be surprised if City don't win it. It's because they are possibly the best team we've ever seen in the Premier League, rather than Manchester United being in a run of form that's only shown recent signs of light, that you can't say it is excellent form right now. Also, Manchester City are at home. A home win, any game that Manchester City don't win at home is 2 points or 3 points dropped, I would say.
You've going to take us to The Guardian next. I think Stuart James writing about the very opposite end of the table and how, I mean, I don't know what the essence of this piece is. Is it that it's very exciting that there's a lot of shit teams at the bottom, or there's a lot of shit teams at the bottom and that's shit?
It's both things are true.
Okay.
So in the bigger picture, the fact that there's a lot of bad teams in the bottom of the table, that is not good for the Premier League, naturally, because the Premier League brands itself as the most competitive league in the world. The bottom 5 would suggest that it's certainly not the best league in the world. After 11 matches, do you want to guess how many points, if you go with the current run of form, how many points you would need to survive?
I'm going to take a pot at this and say 22 points.
Wow, what a guess. What a guess from Adrian Barry this morning. That is
straight off the top of my head stuff.
That is a combination of football nous and mathematical nous.
I'm a football man, Owen, as you know.
You really are, and a mathematical one. So 22 points is all you'll need to survive if things keep going the way they're going. Because after 11 matches, it is the single worst start by the bottom 5 teams in Premier League history. They've first time ever that they've got 7 or fewer points from their opening 11 matches. So the bottom 5 have played the top 5 19 times this season. How many points have they taken from those 19 games? Do you want to have another pot?
Give me the start of that again. The bottom 5 played the top 5 19 times this season.
19 occasions when they played.
Well, on the basis that 22 points is going to make them survive, I'd say 2 points.
0 points. Not a single point has been picked up against the top 5 by any of the bottom 5 this season, which kind of supports this theory that we've been speaking about recently, that the top 6 against the rest is just a chasm at this point, and it's going to keep on growing that way. But as you say, as I said as well, it's a positive and a negative. The positive is come the end of the season, we could have an absolute cracker of a bottom 5 race. We could have a cracker of a relegation battle. Let's just hope that everyone stays as crap as one another, and that no team kind of. Let's hope that Newcastle's win last week basically is a false dawn, and the win for Huddersfield on Monday was a false dawn. Let's not hope that. Let's hope that it doesn't transpire into any sort of good form, and that 3 end up getting relegated. Because if you're going to be bad, at least give us some crap excitement.
And also the other thing is, you won't survive on 22 points.
No, it would be bizarre if the awful start of the season would actually transpire into.
The entire premise of the article is, I think, just ultimately going to be proved false.
Well, the 22 points thing will probably be proved false, but that wasn't the premise of the article. The premise of the article is that the bottom 5 were very, very bad this season, and it might become a trend, and that is worrying for the Premier League.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, as in, like, normally you get 2 teams that are clearly beneath the rest of the quality.
Quite often it's 1.
Okay.
And in many seasons, well, not many seasons, in about 2 or 3 seasons over the last 10 years, you've had no real weak link in the league. Like last year in particular was a great example of no team that tanked completely, but this year things have changed. I think we're going to move on to our last talking point of the breakfast menu this morning.
Can I just make one, just before we do that, there was one thing that I wanted to mention about the James McLean article in the Times Ireland edition this morning, that FA looking into abuse aimed at McLean. There was just one line that stood out at me that I feel I was surprised by it, and I actually, in hindsight, I don't know quite why. Last year, Kick It Out received 400, so Kick It Out is the obviously group who are an
group,
oversight for abuse in the game, essentially. Received 469 reports of abusive behaviour, but none related to anti-Irish abuse.
Not a single complaint.
No.
So this is the first complaint they've ever had about anti-Irish abuse.
Is this a complaint?
I
don't know that this. I actually just. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know at what point it becomes a complaint. I don't know that James McClean has to, like, of the 469 complaints, I'm assuming that they're all put through official channels as paperwork done, and there's committees meeting about it and that sort of stuff. So I don't know, but
does that surprise you? That's that.
Yeah, I was surprised by it. Like, it was, your initial sort of, but I mean, thinking about it, there you would have expected there to have been some complaints.
Obviously this is all we don't know who any of these complaints were made about, and clearly there was only one anti-Irish complaint made, if it was a complaint, and it was against James McClean. Where else is the anti-Irish sentiment going to come from?
It's just in the context of the way everything is going at the minute.
Yes.
Right? Like we're becoming a less sort of tolerant society that, we frequently are very sort of wound up with all the things that separate us, and disregarding the fact that 99.9999% of us, regardless of your name, your age, your skin colour, where you come, who your parents are, we're pretty much the exact same, barring 0.0001%.
Yeah, I would have a suspicion that there isn't actually that much of an anti-Irish sentiment in the stands in English football grounds. The anti-Irish sentiment is brought up by the idea of James McClean. They resent what he represents as a non-poppy wearer, and they then target the thing that they can target him with, which is being Irish. I don't necessarily think that if James McClean was wandering around the pitch and he wasn't James McClean, they'd be necessarily targeting him for being Irish. It's obviously the way they feel he's behaved in an unacceptable manner.
100%.
It isn't really an unacceptable manner.
Fair enough. And I know that football has changed as well. It's become a much more sanitised thing and all. I just mean in the context of 500 complaints. That's all I'm saying. It's a volume.
I agree. I'm not saying that football stands are a good place to be. I would imagine that you would hear racism 50% of the time if you go to a ground in England. If you stand in one of the more militant ends, let's just put it that way, of a football ground, you will hear racist abuse quite an amount of time. I would just be surprised if you heard much anti-Irish abuse. It might come from a very simple thing that there aren't actually that many Irish players left in the Premier League to target, but it also comes from the idea that really in 2018, do football fans really care about Irish people the way they used to really care about them?
No, they've moved on to abuse other people, essentially.
Exactly. I'm not defending football fans here, but I think that's a huge part of it.
The final story that we were going to touch on here, there's a couple of them linked. Paul Keane writing in the Times Ireland edition that experienced managers are in demand is the story here. Statistics showing that counties select candidates who've served their time at the top level of GAA. Writes Paul Keane here that essentially it is a country for old men, and if you have experience of the game, that's to recommend you. It's hooked around the idea that John Mahon at the age of 56 is back in the game, and that this is not an outlier, that in fact this is the way the county boards are going. Yeah,
no managers under the age of 40, it seems, left in the inter-county game, as far as I remember. Certainly
a lot in their 40s, just the vast majority in their 40s, just none below that.
Yeah, and it is, the great irony in this is that 3 different All-Ireland winning managers this decade, in fact, every manager that's not Jim Gavin, that's won an All-Ireland this decade, has been in their 30s. Right. So Pat Gilroy was in his 30s. This is according to the article. I actually didn't know that.
I thought
he was older. Jim McGuinness and Eamon Fitzmaurice were all in their 30s as well. That all surprises me. I thought they were all in their 40s, but according to the article, not the case. So that is the great irony in all of this. But it just goes to show that the time for risk in the GAA is certainly not now. It might come from increased expenditure from county board level. They can't afford to take a chance on any guy taking charge of their inter-county team right now. They need somebody who's going to make use of their resources and execute it well. Now the thing is, there is no guarantee that experience from the 90s or from the last decade is going to help today. Like John Mahon, talking in the newspaper today, literally says that there's no connection between an increased backroom team and results. Yeah. Something that I would dispute quite a bit. I think the reason why backroom teams have become so inflated is because strength and conditioning and statistical analysis has actually improved how teams are performing. It is performance enhancement and legal performance enhancement of that, I should stress. But John Mahon, because whenever you use the term performance enhancement,
he does it on. We've been there already today.
You always think of something else. But I would say that there is still an old school view of thought, and I'm not talking about John Mahon here, I'm saying in general. I think there is an old school of thought that is still rewarded by county boards. That there's something about the county board culture that they look at someone and they're like, that guy's old school, I can relate with that guy. You know, screw the backroom team, he's a genuine GM.
I would think that actually it's, Jesus, I'd love to be involved in a county board with one of the perceived weaker teams where you like go and take an effing risk.
Yeah.
What the hell have you got to lose? Like, bring somebody in who you can sit down, who can, like, not a chancer, right? Somebody who you can sit down who's got some sort of demonstrable evidence of having taken a team at some level and achieved success beyond what was expected, right? And look at the methods that was done by and have all those conversations. I'm not saying take a stupid punt on somebody, but what I am saying is, like, take an educated punt on some young person coming up through the game who might go on to be the Jim Gavin or the Pep Guardiola of GA. Like, it's... Jesus, why not? Because like, look, the alternative, to finish the point, the alternative is that you're a county, and I'll use my own example, like Westmeath, that you're just plodding along anyway. It's not making any difference bringing in, and to be fair to Westmeath, they do have a younger manager in place now, but the other stuff is just not working out. So, like, your basic expectation from a season is next to nil anyway.
Yeah.
So what the hell have you got to lose?
I would say part of it, definitely not all of it, because it's definitely a cultural thing, but part of it also comes down to the way your season lines out. If you've got a championship structure that guarantees you a dozen games of meaningful quality in a season, then a county board is more likely to take a risk. They're likely to say, well, you know, you've got a dozen games this year to really ingrain a culture of perhaps success, get new players a run, try out new methods that we haven't previously tried, and then next year we'll actually put the pressure on you for results. Whereas the way it is now is if you've got 2 games this year and 2 games next year, perhaps, of meaningful quality for a good 10, 12 teams in the entire football championship. So why are you going to take a risk? There's nothing to play with in terms of a risk. When it comes to a risk in the Premier League, you give them 10 games. You see how it goes. You give them a bit of time to build it up. But the way things are in the GEA, like, you don't show up in your one meaningful championship game and it's curtains. You could be the best up-and-coming manager ever, but then suddenly your reputation is in tatters. So I think that's part of it as well. But definitely, I think the cultural thing kind of comes first. It's
tied into, there's a story, I think it might be in the Examiner this morning, about Jason Ryan getting involved with the Cork footballers. He's gone in as a consultant. He's not going in any sort of full-time front-line role, but he is going in as a consultant, and it just seems like such a smart move that you'd have somebody who's been involved in the game at that level, still a very young coach, who at one point was being touted as, we just mentioned, the sort of future Jim Gavins or Pep Guardiola's of Gaelic football, and was certainly being touted in that direction, and, you know, at still a very young age, has a whole bunch of experience and definitely has something to offer in that regard. So it seems like a smart move by Cork. Like, you've Stephen Rochford obviously getting involved in Donegal, you've James Horan going back in Mayo, and, like, I would always maintain that brain drain from Gaelic games, be it hurling or football, is never really a smart thing. Like, you know, you use the NFL, the American football example of coaches who tend to get top jobs. They don't generally get spat out. They go back into, like, top college roles, or they can be career coaches.
Yeah, I guess that helps as well, though, but the fact that there is an actual structure there that is vastly different to our own, that there's so many college jobs out there, and
they're getting paid, and it's the full-time gig, and there is that difference, sure.
Yeah, like, first of all, just pick you up on something there. You were giving out to me about using the word bespoke at the top of the show. You just used the word brain drain. So hashtag brain drain. You know, I'm just saying it's good. It's very business speak, but it's good.
Oh, is it business speak?
I would say so. I've never really heard the term before. It's true though. Like, there is a fine line to be struck here between getting a guy in, and he's experienced, but getting him in for the sake of that experience,
sure,
rather than actually kind of taking a detailed look at that experience. What has he learned from the process? And I think, do county boards ask themselves the question more deeper? Do they ask themselves this: what have they achieved during that experience, or what have they learned during that experience?
Apart from the experience itself.
Apart from the experience itself. Like, you would like to think that every intercounty manager who's been involved this century has learned something from it, but there are different levels of learning. I would definitely say, when it comes to the James Horn example, he learned quite a bit from his first time in charge of Mayo. I think they're fairly safe with that example, but there's a couple of other examples which are a tad more risky, I think, when it comes to the perceived good experiences that a manager might have got.
There was one comment that jumped out at me from the piece, just exactly on that topic that you're talking about. It says, a quote here: "Players like to work with experienced guys, particularly when they're at a development stage in their careers." Writes John Evans, the Wicklow football manager, who's seen a team or two. As he says himself, Tipperary, Meath, Roscommon, etc., etc. So, keeper comments coming in. We've a whole bunch of them that we're going to put to primarily for Alan Quinlan at the minute. We do have a great competition running for the best comment of the morning. We've got a great lineup, of course, for our sold-out roadshow next Tuesday at the Olympia Theatre, all in association with Heineken Rugby Club. We have Keith Wood, Brian O'Driscoll, Joe Malloy is going to be looking after proceedings. Justin Marshall is going to be there. Alan Quinlan is going to be there. And Paul O'Connell is a very special guest on the night. So just leave us a comment on hashtag OTB AM this morning, wherever you're watching, to win one of the very last pair of tickets for there. They are VVIP, so it means best seat in the house. You're going to meet and greet with the special guests on the night and a very special off-air Q&A with our own Quinny. So you can leave us a comment and win potentially a pair of tickets for that. And you can check out HeinekenRugbyClub.com for more chances to win there. Always drink responsibly. Visit Drinkaware for more. I think we're going to come back to those comments in a little bit. Tell me if I'm right. Is that right for Quinny? Yeah, we're going to do that. So that's coming your way in a little bit. But do keep your comments coming in. In the meantime, we'll come to them in a little bit. It's exactly 8:30 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us. We have already seen, it says in my script here, we've already seen some of the lads' work from the Web Summit this week. There was a little bit of it, I'm told, that went on in the middle of the going to Champions League games. And what game did you go and see?
Benfica Ajax.
Any good?
It was grand. It was a 1-1 draw.
Right.
Got to see the Champions League anthem in full flow, and we got to see Ajax fans throwing chairs at stewards. So it was a good evening, well spent.
Why were they throwing chairs at stewards?
Because they're away fans locked in, penned into a little corner of a stadium.
Well, was there not like a giant net? I think Tommy's...
There was, but they were obviously, Tommy was quite active.
He's got strong Insta game.
Talk to me about it.
You catch you a few...
Yeah, like it's
compromising positions.
It's what kids do these days, apparently.
Right.
Anyway, there was...
Who's older, you or Tommy?
Tommy. Ajax fans penned in, I don't know why they started, but anyway, a kind of a stream of, not stewards, apologies, policemen in there, fully armoured, and red chairs flying everywhere. Presumably they just pulled the red chairs out and threw them at it, but that's part of the Champions League experience, isn't it?
Right, Owen, you caught up with the UFC fighter Paige Van Zandt a little bit earlier in the week, and the former Chelsea and Spurs boss Andre Villas-Boas. Both of those pieces up on our YouTube channel. We've got a brilliant interview as well with the US broadcaster and sports writer Jameel Hill. That's coming your way next week. But this morning we're going to be catching up with our chat with the professional surfer Anastasia Ashley. Here she is on the lack of female influences available to her in and around her sport of surfing when she was growing up.
You didn't have any specific role model as a kid. You didn't have any woman role model as a kid as a surfer.
No, I think when I was growing up, for all sports in general and specifically surfing, it was very male dominated. It still is, but it was very much a boys' club that, it wasn't cool to be a female athlete in general. And that was if you were even in, volleyball, tennis, golf. It was kind of like, oh, you're a tomboy, or oh, you can't be a cute girl. You're just a dude. It was very much that mindset. And so when I was growing up, I would always look at guys, and I was always, a fan of the guys, because the female pro surfers from that era, it was like, oh yeah, like they're just one of the guys, but they're not as good. They weren't given their own category and their own prestige, where it was like, all about the men in the sport. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just crazy to see where the sport has gone. I mean, never in my lifetime I thought that surfing was going to be in the Olympics. So we've been seeing from that overall, the sport in general, it's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say all that, because we were doing a conference on the show a couple of weeks ago which ran with the slogan, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And it was a women in sport conference, and that idea that if you didn't see somebody as a girl surfing professionally, then you can't be that. So you managed to break that barrier. How did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me it was just a long time of hard work and dedication, and knowing that, hey, like, I'm gonna work my ass off and try to make a career out of this, because I didn't really have the means or options of doing anything else. From my background, it was like, okay, this is what I'm good at. Yeah. I need to figure it out. There's no example to kind of lead by of how to, there was one thing being a professional surfer. There was professional female surfers growing up when I was around, but there was not really people who were making their living off of it. That was a whole other thing. Yeah. So for me, it was like, okay, how am I gonna, survive, and how am I gonna figure this out when it wasn't cool? And thankfully, I mean, the world caught on and realized that being a female athlete is cool, and being a surfer is cool. So being a female surfer is the best thing, coolest thing in the world. So
Totally, and I'm sure the world of surfing probably realised it's actually better for all of us the more diversity we have in this sport, and that goes for literally every other sport in the world.
Right, yeah.
So that's obviously something that will bleed into the next generation. I'm not sure if you've seen that yet. Is it still kind of early days, or are you seeing this already where you're inspiring a new generation?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the amount of women in the water, and that's just like in a daily thing. Like, I used to only be the only girl out on the beach. Now I see going surfing. It was always the girls laying in bikinis on the beach. And now I see, like, you know, at least a couple girls surfing. Sometimes I surf, you know, like a month ago, and I saw it was an equal split, 50-50.
Right.
And it was really cool to see, because I just never in my, like, I was like, wow, I was blown away. Like, for years, I'd be the only girl who's a girl surfing. So, yeah, I've definitely seen just a big explosion. I think in the next 10 years, I think the generation coming up now who is, you know, probably like the preteens, that generation, so in the next 10 to 20 years, I think it's going to be huge.
Sure.
Bigger, yeah.
And like we're at Web Summit, we've spoken to a lot of people about like the implementation of a brand as an individual, about kind of putting yourself out there in terms of how important one's Instagram is, for example, and things like that, and one's visibility in terms of how they can preach to a choir of people who are quite impressionable is quite important as well. That like I often wonder if someone like you is thinking to yourself that I'm doing what I'm doing in the water, which is really important for the next generation of potential surfers, male and female, but what I'm doing on social media as well is equally as important, because that, to a certain extent, more people are seeing what I'm doing there.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I think speaking to that next generation, I think you know, social media is great because you share your life and what you're doing, and it's also a glamorized version of that. So
Sure.
I think it's very exciting for me to see when people watch me do something, even from like a personal standpoint of, like, you know, buying my first home, or you know, getting to travel to somewhere I've never been before, or meeting celebrities, or doing all these very fun, exciting, interesting things, and knowing that surfing is what got me there, and that journey. And I think that, you know, I think that is inspiring to people, and I think it's good for people to see, like, hey, look, you can be an athlete, you can be a female, and you can still achieve these things in your life, and you're not just going to be, you know, pigeonholed because you like sports, or you like whatever you like, you know. So it's a nice open playing field. That's what's I think
it should
good.
be.
Yeah.
It's interesting as well, like you list off a lot of positives about social media there, you know, like a lot of our broadcasts are in social media as well. We all know the positives of it, but working in an area like this, we've certainly seen the negative side of social media, and you've spoken about the negative side of social media. Maybe not too negative, but you've kind of mentioned things, you've said in interviews before that there's like weird messages quite often and things like that. Is that a regular occurrence?
I think what the pluses and minuses of social media, I think social media is great. You connect with people all over the world. You can keep in touch with your friends, your family. You can learn new things and connect with people and have a community out there. But I think the more negative sides is that, yes, you put your best self on social media, and you put the best version of yourself. I mean, it's very rare that I'll post something when I'm having a bad day, if I'm traveling and I lost my luggage, or I missed my flight and I'm, you know, stuck by myself, or, you know, I mean, that's not all my worst problems. But for example, like, you know, I'm posting when I get to the location, like, here I am, I'm so happy I'm here. So I think that's also the twist on social media, that, you know, people do need to realize social media is not real life. It is one aspect of your life, and it's often the pretty side. Yeah. So I think people need to realize that, and that's what I like to say is, like, yes, like, my life online is awesome. I get to do great things, but that's only one glimpse of the behind the scenes, what takes me to get there, or what steps in my career I had to do to get to this point.
There's one last thing I wanted to ask you about, and it actually came up in an interview we did earlier on. We had Paige Van Zandt, the UFC fighter, in with us, and she was speaking about the Me Too movement and the importance of that in sport, or the potential importance of that in sport, which is probably a more apt way of putting it. And she said something very interesting. She said that the reason why the Me Too movement hasn't penetrated sport is not that sport doesn't have the same problems as, say, Hollywood. In fact, I would suggest it's probably got worse problems than Hollywood when it comes to gender and people's attitudes towards women. What she said was that women have such a role to actually gain acceptance in the world of sport right now, that the idea of actually fighting and starting a movement like Me Too is so far from their thoughts at the moment. I'm not sure if that's something you agree with.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the difference of sports, the sports world versus the Hollywood world, is that sports to this day is still very much dependent on your actual skill and what you can do in an arena or on a wave. Whereas, if the comparison to, say, Hollywood, with, models and actresses and different people like that, it's not so physical, if that makes sense. So I think, I think that she had a good point. Like you said, the actual barrier to get into the sport is like you don't get discovered off the street to be a professional athlete. You have to work pretty hard to get to a certain place. But I mean, I think it is a real issue, and I think a lot of people, I think it's great, all the women who've stood up for that, and I do think there'll probably be more to come out in sports. Personally, I think it's now a great time to share, if you need to speak up and say something.
Yeah, it sure is, because there is clearly a whole amount of people who are going to support you in that. Like you mentioned there, it's more physical in sport, but what do you mean by that? What's the difference there between Hollywood and sport?
I think the difference between Hollywood and the sports world in general is that, for a female, the Hollywood world, in my opinion, is that your level of skill doesn't correlate with your level of accomplishment or fame.
Okay.
Where in sports, it kind of goes it goes hand in hand for the most part. There are, obviously sports celebrities and, who, even myself, I don't actively compete anymore, but I did for 20 years.
Sure.
So it's not like, a model or an actress who, getting discovered does happen. Where in sports, it's not really a reality.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's more of a meritocracy in sport. Where okay, I get it. And that makes so much sense as well. So I wonder, like, maybe when we had that conversation, the way I framed that question is actually wrong, that we're not waiting for a Me Too movement in sport, that sport is actually in a much more healthier place than we thought, because that's just the way it is. It is, as you say, based on skill. Yeah,
it is. However, I mean, in any aspect, whether it be sports, Hollywood, politics, even if you work at a corporation, that is still a really real issue, and it's not something to just say, oh, it's just in Hollywood. I think Hollywood does have, though, probably out of any field professionally, the theory of your actual skill to correlation of success doesn't necessarily need to line up. So, so that's I think something that, though, is a great movement.
All right, that is Eoin in conversation with Anastasia Ashley, and you can check out that full piece on our YouTube channel, as well as some other bits and bobs that the lads were up to when they were over at the Web Summit, Andrew Villas-Boas, and some other good stuff up there as well. Darren, welcome to the studio. Good morning to you.
Adrian. How are you?
You were over in Lisbon as well in the junket for a little bit.
Yeah, I got half the junket. I got the cheap seats
Half
for the
the junket.
Yeah.
I mean,
so I got the full working
it's
experience.
It's almost ridiculous that you go the full way over there and like halfway through then ditch out and come back.
Yeah,
Why would you leave halfway through?
Well, I can't say it was my choice. I left because I had to be back here to work.
All right, because I mean, going to something and leaving halfway through.
I mean,
sorry, Darren, that's...
I'm disappointed in myself, but really I had no choice. If I had a choice to leave halfway through, that would be really bad. Yeah. Because when you make a conscious decision to walk out in the middle, that's not great. But sometimes unfortunately...
necessity dictates.
Yeah, necessity dictates. But if it's not necessity, it's a strange decision to walk out.
So you didn't get to go to the game with the lads?
No, I missed it. Was it good?
Really good, yeah.
Yeah.
1-1,
yeah. It was fantastic.
Who scored? Benfica scored first?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they went 1-0 up. Place went wild. Obviously, it kind of deflated atmosphere.
Mood, I presume, place went dead a bit. Did it after the equaliser? It sort of flattened off a bit, or did they get behind them then and sort of try and we can come on? We
didn't finish 1-0, did it?
No, 1-1.
Finished 1-1, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. It was kind of a deflated atmosphere after the goal, but as you said there, the crowd really got behind them then in the second half.
I actually saw Benfica Boa Vista in February because I'd been to Lisbon before, and just they're such a passionate crowd. They've got the eagle. They're pumped before the game, but after the game is really just at the full-time whistle. There's a wall of noise that greets the players. It was something special. Was it better on the Champions League night?
It was better on the Champions League night. Did you see Gerard's interview with the top brass?
I did not.
It was actually quite surreal. So we had it set up with the big dog, the CEO, I think he is, and we walk in and the entrance is the museum. So we go up to the museum desk, like, do we have to buy tickets or what? And the person behind the desk was like, no, just go upstairs and turn right. So we go upstairs and turn right, and everybody's like milling around the museum, looking at a stadium, and suddenly the wall opens. And the man kind of peeks his head out and is like, come hither. Right. And we go in and there's just a sprawling boardroom in the background, all wooden walls and floors, exactly as you'd imagine. It was just so stereotypically boardroom. Turn around and Luis Sao is there. And then the second time you go in there, Rui Costa's there and introduces himself to all of us.
I hope he works at the club and just wasn't hanging around the club.
I really hope so too, because he was in behind that secret door as well. So he would have had to get invited in there. But yeah, that was quite surreal. A great football club.
So supreme hospitality at Benfica is what you're saying.
Supreme hospitality. And
enjoyed the game, good atmosphere afterwards, and that was it.
Yeah, really, 10 out of 10.
Good stuff, right? Alan Quinlan's on the way in just a little bit to look ahead to the weekend of rugby. It's an interesting weekend. But Darren, what have you got for us?
We will start with the rugby, and the Ireland head coach Joe Schmidt has hinted that Conor Murray and a comeback in time to face New Zealand is unlikely. The Munster man has been training with the squad in Maynooth this week. The scrum half has not played since helping Ireland to a series win over Australia in June. He suffered a neck injury during pre-season, and Schmidt says Murray has resumed full contact but doesn't want to take any chances with him.
Well, he's not with us this week. He came in last week and he really impressed me. I was surprised how forward he was, how he is doing contact. It's just that we want to get him absolutely 100%, and we've given him this week to improve a little bit further, and then we'll have a look. But it would be a huge ask, a massive outside chance for him to be involved straight in against New Zealand when his last test match was against Australia in June.
That rubber stamps it for me. He's starting.
The conspiracy theorist in you says he's in. I mean, if he's on the cover of the programme the next week, you'll know that it's a real deal. Declan Rice says he's struggling to make a decision on his international future. He played for the Republic of Ireland at underage level and was capped 3 times at senior level. Some interesting detail in that Times interview. Rice says that his father Sean may have put a little bit of pressure on him inadvertently by hanging those 3 caps on the wall. They're on the wall in his house, proudly displayed, where Martin O'Neill went to visit him and try and talk him into staying with the Republic of Ireland cause. He also revealed that his first Ireland cap he won it at under 16 level, and he sent it to his grandparents Jack and Margaret, who came from Douglas in County Cork. While Edson Edouard's goal gave Celtic a hard-earned 2-1 win over Red Bull Leipzig in the Europa League, the Hoops now level on 6 points with the German side, but remain in third on goal difference with 2 games left in Group G. Rangers left stunned by 2 goals in 2 minutes. Spartak Moscow came from behind to win their match 4-3. Manager Steven Gerrard not happy with how they defended.
Do you feel the defensive changes played any part at all in the frailties today?
Possibly, if people want to say that, I'll take responsibility for that. But I think under 12s, under 13s normally can clear the ball with either foot. And I think when you get a little bit older, you learn how to play the game positionally. So I don't know, I'm a bit confused over that one, especially with the lads that were picked, because they've done so well for us so far and got us into this position. So I can't be too critical.
We were talking about fatigue with managers a bit earlier on, Eddie Jones particularly, and José Mourinho to a large degree as well. I can't wait for the next 30 years of Steven Gerrard. From what I'm hearing so far, he is going to be highly entertaining. He tells it like it is.
Just get him angry, it seems, and then he's got it is quite the line to say he couldn't do what a 12-year-old can do, but I can't be too critical. That is just the all-time great managerial line from a Rangers manager.
It's like the carrot and the stick, isn't it?
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's brilliant. You almost kind of wish a bit of success, that his reputation doesn't get too damaged, as we've been speaking about earlier on in the show. It's like one of these bad moments, and suddenly it's your career in tatters. Kind of hope we get him into more of a mainstream role. I
think that'll happen anyway. I think that, barring an absolute disaster at Rangers, which is finishing third, they can get beaten in Europe, and everybody just says, well, look, he didn't have the resources, doesn't have the players, but actually he seems like an impressive guy, so let's give him this. He'll get a Premier League job for sure, no hassle.
No, I hope so, and let's hope that he kind of is in a precarious position quite a bit and manages to stay there for the next 20 years, as you say, because when he's getting frustrated, he's very, very good and very, very funny. Like, more of that carrot and stick lines, if possible.
He's a lifer, yeah.
Well, he obviously felt that he would have done a better job on the pitch than the players, much like this guy who was watching his son play for the under-8 team of Bow Street in the Mid-Wales League.
Oh, where's the goalkeeper going, mate? Get back in goal! Oh, where's the goalkeeper going, mate?
I mean, the best part is that at the end, the dad is just so dejected anyway, because it goes in.
Yeah. It's like it is, there's no getting around the fact that it's funny, but also he's pushed his child on the ground.
Well, come on, the child had a bit of work to do even with the push. He kind of wraps the left arm around the ball as well. It's kind of like when you've rounded the keeper, a bit of work to do. Keeper still had a bit of work to do there. Defence let him down. No 13-year-olds in that team, clearly, because they didn't manage to clear the ball accurately.
Just don't, like, I'd say, as this might be something for our dadcast, which you can check out, by the way. It's an All Good Providers, excellent conversation about parenting. Like, rule number one, well, maybe not rule number one, but certainly in the top 5, don't ever at any point push your child on the ground.
I'm not sure if you'd actually hear that piece of advice from the dadcast, to be quite honest.
There's extenuating circumstances, though, isn't there? I mean, the ball's coming. He's trying to stop his kid from looking silly.
Well, we don't know.
He actually seems like he was. We were looking.
He's distracting the kid.
It seems like he was having a conversation with his child. So, like, what's he doing over there? That's actually another question. What the hell is the dad doing over there?
He's just the literal definition of a pushy parent. He is literally a pushy parent.
Yeah.
The guy who tweeted the video has been on Twitter to say that it is the dad, the goalkeeper, and the kid.
Gives another look. Can we fire it up there again? Just what's like, just some sort of sense of what the hell this idiot is doing by the post. Look. Yeah, look. He's talking to the look.
I think before we were too critical here.
Watch. Look, he's talking to the kid. Look.
And then he walks away in disgust.
Leave the kid alone. It's his fault.
It's all the dad's fault. Yeah, the dad's distracting him.
Like, seriously, before we're too critical, I need to ask you: have you ever played in an under-8s mini Welsh, mid-Welsh league final before? Because certainly you can't place a high enough importance on that, and clearly it would have brought shame in the family unless he made that save. So. Let's give the dad a free pass here.
Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. One person actually tweeted to say he should be banned for life, which I thought was a little bit of an extreme reaction, but we will move on anyway. Chelsea also into the last 32 of the Europa League after a 1-0 win away to Bate Borisov. Arsenal have advanced to the knockout phase despite being held to a 0-0 draw against 10-man Sporting Lisbon. Well, Tottenham have been warned by the Advertising Standards Authority in England after a promotion they ran was deemed misleading. Spurs claimed their new stadium would be the only place in London to watch Champions League football this season. The ASA has warned them to stop making claims they cannot fulfil. A fan of their rivals Arsenal reportedly complained. Tottenham were the only London club to finish in the top 4 of the Premier League last season. They face a battle though to qualify for the Champions League knockout stages this season and could be on the ropes and about to bow out of that competition.
Do we know if they're deliberately trolling or if it's an actual sort of violation of advertising law?
Well, I suppose it is misleading because the stadium won't be built in time for this season's Champions League. So they're not going to be playing there before the end of this season, and there's no guarantees they'll be there next season. So to suggest it is the only place in London to see Champions League football, for me, I'm no advertising guru, but that looks like a misleading ad. Yeah,
it is. It's also kind of the best Spurs thing that's ever happened. Spursy construction workers on Spursy Stadium. It's just a beautiful, beautiful story.
In the Spursy advertising department.
DH
on YouTube says it looks like the dad is trying to get him into a better position. I mean, like, just leave the kid alone. Stop. Why are you over talking to him? Darren, highly entertaining as always.
Thank you very much,
Welcome
Adrian.
back from your junket. Shame that you
half a junket.
I mean, hopefully the next time you go, because, you know, get the full thing. It's ridiculous leaving halfway through.
It really is ridiculous.
Thanks, William, for coming in. Alan Quinlan is on the way very shortly. He's going to talk rugby, Ireland, Argentina, of course, this weekend. So we're going to get his thoughts on that and plenty more as well besides. But before all of that, coming up on 5 to 9 on this Friday morning, a few former Ireland players have been linked with the Republic of Ireland under-21 job, of course, following Noel King's retirement during the week, including Stephen Reid. He was on with Keith Andrews on the Keith Andrews show yesterday about that position.
I know you do bits and bobs with the FA, and you've obviously got your pro licence over there. It's players, ex-players and coaches like him, like you, and I threw Duffer into the equation because he's taken it very seriously as well. Would that be something that might tempt you?
I think it could possibly. It definitely could. I know, obviously, having spoken to you over time, Keith, and especially when we spoke about it, or when we briefly spoke about it earlier on today about that role, and I think it's an important role. You know, you're looking at a 21s group that are still most of them in their development stage of their career, so I don't think it can go to someone that has no experience of that type of role or working in the game. For me, it'd be a difficult one to be a first job in football to head that up, because it's, you know, you've got to inspire this group. This hopefully will be the group that will then start dipping their toe into the senior setup, like you see with Gareth Southgate now. You've almost got players bypassing playing Premier League football almost and going straight from the 21s into the senior group.
Yeah.
So I don't see why that can't be a similar situation where you've got a group that are improving and developing in the 21s that then join the senior group. Because I still remember when I played 21s football, I used to absolutely buzz for meeting up, and when we used to have a 21s game against the senior team, the senior 11, and it was brilliant. And anyone that did well in that group and that 21s game against the seniors, Mick would throw in. He would call them over for a couple of training sessions.
Yeah, Stephen Reid in conversation with Keith Andrews on the show yesterday. It's live every Thursday, of course, at lunchtime, as is Keith and Alan Quinlan. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Adrian.
How's the form?
How are you?
Very well.
Have you seen this clip that's doing the rounds of the dad pushing the son?
Yeah.
John Gaffney Byrne says, come on, the dad was coaching us. I've been giving out about it, essentially. I'm saying this dad is a bit of a dickhead. We can see it here on screen.
I agree.
A bit harsh.
Like, what's he doing? John Gaffney Byrne says, come on, the dad was coaching his son, unfortunately, while the opposition was lining up a strike. Laughing emoji. What a dickhead.
I agree.
It's funny though. Come on, you can say.
When you have a child, if you see someone pushing your son or his own son like that, you wouldn't appreciate it. It's funny in some senses. In some sense.
You know what? The funniest part is the woman who's taking the video. Her cackling at it is, I think, probably the funniest part of it.
But like, what? Why would you laugh at it then if it's such a sickening thing, Adrian?
Sickening is definitely overstating it on, and you are sort of fond of a bit of hyperbole.
You see, as you called him a dickhead doing that, why are you laughing then? Why aren't you giving out about her laughing?
I mean, why would I give out about... Like, she's entitled... If she wants to go and laugh about it,
it's just a funny thing that happened in a football match. And I think it's actually hammed up quite a bit. I think the father's reaction afterwards is impossibly hilarious.
Do you think he was right to do what he did?
Not really getting into the
Was he right to do what he did, yes or no?
Would I do it? No.
Was he right to do what he did, yes or no?
The grey area, in my opinion.
Yes or no?
It's right in the opinions.
Yes or no?
Probably not, no. Probably not, but it's funny.
That's it.
It's actually hilarious.
You know. Anyway, look at. Let's move on. We want to talk about a rugby, and speaking of dickheads, Eddie Jones has been.
This is poor Eddie.
I retract that straight away. He's obviously had some stuff to say. I don't know if you've seen these quotes in the newspapers this morning. He's talking about Johnny Sexton and Owen Farrell, and he's making the point that Johnny Sexton gets favourable treatment from referees and from officialdom and all that sort of stuff. And if it was to happen to Owen Farrell, I mean, the book could be thrown at him, which is recent
I don't know why he said that,
right.
because I haven't seen Owen Farrell on the receiving end of any big hits. There's none that I can remember.
Isn't it, at this stage?
He does. They've similar temperament. They're very competitive, very physical for fly halves, which is not traditionally the norm. They like to impose themselves. Big, they played so well together on the lines. They complemented each other in that second and third test. So, look, he's always trying to play some sort of mind games with somebody, isn't he? And I don't think Johnny Sexton gets favourable treatment.
No.
Do you?
No.
Not really. I don't think there's anything that stands out to me there.
No, and he went into a lot of detail about, if Sexton gets hit off the ball, he almost seems to run. Like,
but I don't know why it's relevant and why he's bringing that stuff up. It's nothing to do with, if he's playing Ireland this week, maybe he's trying to influence the referee or something. I suppose he's referring to Owen Farrell, and I know he did say that if Sexton makes that tackle,
he gets away with it and there's no fuss. Farrell gets away with it too.
Listen,
so
I know for a fact it's the wrong decision, and I know that was discussed, and that's behind closed doors with the referees and and World Rugby. No, but look, it was a mistake, and I think we spoke about it on Monday about all the different punters, and different players, ex-players saying, you know, some being divided on it. It's done and dusted now. There's no point in rehashing it. But I think Eddie Jones is he's bringing it back into the spotlight there by talking about that. And I don't know why, because like if Ireland are playing England this week, fair enough. You try and find something, but
are you saying that behind closed doors they've sort of
well,
some
no,
sort of
I
agreement?
think so. I think it was acknowledged that, you know, it was probably the wrong decision.
Yeah.
It was the wrong decision, and it's you know, South Africa didn't turn up to the coaches meeting during the week. There was a coaching conference as well where all the coaches went over and met the referees and stuff, and they're still not happy with that. And you can see it on Twitter yourself. It's easy to figure it out. All the coaches are there, and there's no one from South Africa there, so they're obviously a bit disappointed still with that. But it's water under the bridge. It'll be interesting to see at the weekend if there is any high shots or any high tackles, how they'll be managed.
Yeah.
And maybe some guys might get penalised now for ones that are kind of 50-50. If they're anywhere up around here, if there's a big impact. So we'll see.
Did you see Razzie coaching one of his players during that clip?
Yeah.
What was going on there? Was he trying to deliver a message to somebody?
Sarcastic, I think. And
it's like, because the guy comes in at the end and he throws a swinging arm in it.
Yeah,
and
it's
he's
completely
like,
put on. It's completely put on. And it's, I didn't like it, to be honest. I didn't like it.
It's a dig at World Rugby.
Yeah, and he doesn't need to do that. And, you know, from my time in knowing him with Munster and the way he handled himself with the press here, I'd be disappointed with that one. I just didn't think that was.
They're clearly
nice.
seething over it. Like if they go to that.
Yeah, I know. And I'd rather he come out and have a rant straight away in the press conference than the sarcastic approach. But look, he tried to probably keep his counsel and not lose the cool after the game. And look, people don't sometimes realise coaches feel that kind of sometimes more pressure and that adrenaline rush as well, and it means so much to them. And you know, small margins like that, and I won't change my opinion. It should have been a penalty at least, and South Africa probably would have won the game. But they play France tomorrow night, and that's a tough place to go to go and play in Paris for them.
We want to come on to Ireland, but just before we do that, Roger reckons that England are going to get dismantled, was the word that he used, by New Zealand tomorrow, is it? What do you think?
It's all Rog, Richard, isn't it?
All Rog.
Loves Rog on Friday.
Man, Rog this and Rog that.
Well, he's the future Leinster coach.
Rog, Bod. Who else? What other ones do you like?
I'm not all about these nicknames. Go on. Yeah. What do you think?
Look, he's a superb knowledge of the game, obviously, and coaching in New Zealand. He knows these players inside out. I suppose looking from the outside in, and if you were given predictions, you think, New Zealand will be much too strong for him. But part of me just thinks that, you know, writing this English group off and playing at home, and physically you've got to match New Zealand and not let them dominate you and get quick ball, and because they're incredibly skillful. So if they get on the front foot, of course they can blow England away. I have this feeling that England are going to rattle them a little bit and upset them. I think New Zealand probably will win the game, but I just think England can probably frustrate them a bit and get in their faces a little bit. And I imagine it's going to be very physical and competitive. Is there a bit of a lesson in the discourse around this game for us in Ireland that, say, 12 months ago you were looking at this game and everybody was talking about this 12 months ago when we were sitting here, and almost a year later there's nowhere near the level of fanfare. We're still really excited for the fixture, but it was supposed to be the two best teams in the world going toe-to-toe tomorrow. The English game and New Zealand game, Yeah, like I wonder from our point of view, is it like, grand, it's important to beat Argentina and it would be very important to beat the All Blacks once again, but just relax, it's still another year away. Yeah, it is, and I've said that a few times myself, that it's a year out, and they're important games. All internationals are important, and when I played, I always kind of viewed them. Sometimes people go, that's just like, sometimes even Italy last week in Chicago is probably the biggest game of some players' lives because they're playing an Irish jersey, and there's the possibilities to come after that. So it depends what way you view it. England, New Zealand, I suppose, with the English media and Northern Hemisphere media would have probably said, they will be the two best teams in the world, and this England, New Zealand and Twickenham will be just a phenomenal game, but it's not. The Vunipolos are missing for England. They've had an uncertain kind of run, a poor run under Eddie Jones recently, but I still think at the end of the day, and we've as an Irish side, we've played well in November, we've done well in Six Nations, and ultimately, you know, the World Cup is the one you want to try and do well in the next time. And Argentina seem to peak at World Cups, so yeah, even though they're very important games, they're not the be-all and end-all a year out from a World Cup, because there's a lot of rugby to be played between now and then.
Owen comes back from the web summit and he starts using words like discourse.
Yeah,
it's one of my go-to words.
He must have met some very intelligent people over there, Adrian, and
everybody else met.
It's the sort of guff that you...
Yeah.
Sean O'Brien back in from the off is one of the big talking points, and definitely want to get your thoughts on this. So, like, when everybody, I suppose, is fit, it's always a question, particularly with that back row, who's starting, who goes where. What he offers you and the credit that he has in the bank, almost, is that something that's going to be a factor for Joe Schmidt, do you think, over the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think so. Look, he's tough as nails, Sean O'Brien, you know, and when he's fit and up to speed, he can really influence games. And what I like about Sean O'Brien is he's a fellow you'd like to have beside you, right, because you know that no matter what happens in a game, he'll be vocal, he'll believe that he can change things on the run. He's pretty intelligent as regards, you know, viewing the game and seeing opportunities, and he's a very powerful player as well. So he's delivered as well, and like you say, experience in the bank, particularly when you play New Zealand, he will love that task of kind of going up against the top team. He just loves a challenge. I'm not saying Dan Levy or Josh van der Fleer or Jordy Murphy wouldn't. They're all excellent players. But I think Sean O'Brien has that bit of experience over them. He's been through the mill, you know, played in the Lions tour down there, 3 tests, and performed really well. So that's given him a bit of an advantage. I think when Sean O'Brien's fit, he's your number one, because you know, but he's had so much trouble with the injuries. So I'm glad to see him back in there, and I really hope he goes well. He's a super player and a super character to have in the team, and he's real leadership qualities now. You think 2 years ago he didn't play in Chicago and he'd been out for a period of time, and then he came back in and played the game in Dublin, and I was commentating on the game, and I think right from the first kick-off Ireland moved the ball over and back and then kicked it, and then New Zealand were attacking for about 3 or 4 minutes of play with non-stop, and Sean O'Brien he affected 3 or 4 of those rucks and nearly got the ball, and I think maybe the 4th or 5th one
he's got a bit of everything too, though, hasn't he? Like, in terms of the mix.
But look, it's difficult when you don't play for a while. It's always a challenge being sharp and being up to match speed. He has an ability to go back in there and just kind of get up to speed at times. And you know, he will have a good bulk of work done the last couple of weeks and been involved in the Leinster games as well. So he's not going in out of the cold, and you know, he stayed home from Chicago and he would have been preparing with the team last week as well, so with the group that stayed in Dublin. So, but look, he's a big character, but he needs to play well. You know, sometimes if you can't just get selected on reputation, and that kind of situation ends for people. He's got to make sure he performs well, because, you know, Levy's on the bench, he'll be chomping at the bit to try and get back. He'll be a lot more confident that maybe he can be number one and should be number one, Levy and the others as well, you know.
In that regard, like, is the next couple of weeks a pivotal point almost in Sean O'Brien's career in terms of Ireland?
I wouldn't say pivotal. Look, it's kind of like what Owen was saying. I was saying to Owen, this isn't the be all and end all. What I'd just love to see him is get a run of matches where he can enjoy himself again and get fit and you know, look forward to the games week after week and get a good build up into the Six Nations. It's a long way out, you know. World Cup, and there'll be a long summer preparing for it and different sort of camps and stuff like that. A lot can change.
So even if he doesn't set the world alight against Argentina and or New Zealand?
Yeah, so are you looking for a standout man of the match performance? It's maybe unrealistic. It's 50, 55, 60 minutes of Sean O'Brien being hard, being aggressive, being in people's faces, making 8-10 carries, 10-12 tackles as well, and you know, making sure they're impact tackles and that he's physically, you know, because he can physically dominate people. He can mix it with anyone physically. So not looking for a 9 out of 10 performance, but a 7 or 8 would be brilliant to see. And I think everyone in Irish rugby would love to see that, because he's a wonderful player.
It seems we're at the stage with the Irish pack now where we're thinking about combinations rather than thinking about the power rankings of who the best players are in every role.
Yeah.
That, like, Sean O'Brien's big thing is how does he work with CJ and Peter O'Mahony, and then by extension how does he work with whatever becomes our second choice, second row alongside James Ryan. Is that the way Joe Schmidt is thinking about the little jigsaw pieces rather than the individual?
Yeah, and he has an ability, he has a thing now where he has options to do horses for courses. I don't like horses for courses too much.
You think the best 15 at all times?
Yeah, well, look, sometimes it can benefit. It benefited me before. I played 7 against Argentina in 2003. Simon Easterby was 6 and Victor Costello was 8. So I wasn't a natural 7, but I think I was, that time Eddie O'Sullivan picked us for a reason, to put pressure on their line-out. Simon and myself were pretty good in the line-out. And maybe to, go for a little bit more size in the back row, whatever. And that happens over the years. Australia have done it with Pocock and Hooper, where they play 2-7. So changing those combinations around, like, I'm not saying that you always, that you don't do horses for courses. But I think form is a thing. And look, for Joe Schmidt now, there's a lot of, the back row is phenomenal. Like, a lot of these guys can play 6 as well. Levy can play 6, Jordy Murphy can play 6 and 8, Sean O'Brien can play across the back row. So there's a lot of options. Jack Conan is someone who can come in. Rhys Ruddock has been very impressive as well of late. So there's loads of options there. So I think he has that ability to change things around a bit now, not just on form, but to pick who suits best for the opposition.
One thing on that horses for courses, in terms of the second row, Ryan and Henderson obviously starting tomorrow. Is that horses for courses, or I kind of suspect that's Joe Schmidt's starting second row in the World Cup?
Row, yeah, your best second row combination. But I think if they don't perform to high standard and Ireland kind of ended up with a bad performance and lose the game, well, then you're looking at Tadhg Byrne maybe coming in and maybe getting a start, and Toner coming back in, and so it's. I think if you look at Retallick and Whitelock, every time New Zealand play, they're their top 2. They have guys like Barrett and that can come in there, Romano, that can come into the side. But obviously, I think you want to get players to that level, as many of them as you can, to top world-class kind of top international players, and have as many as you can. And if you end up with 3 or 4 in the second row position, it's great. If you end up with 2 and maybe a tiny little bit of a gap between the guys behind, and that their ambition is to get into the team, well, you've a kind of added benefit of hunger and desire, and you're pushing each other. So I think James Ryan at the moment, and based on what we saw last year and over the summer, he's the first second row you put down. Henderson is probably, there's a different kind of role in each of those second rows, the left and right, the 4 and the 5, the jumping at the front of the line out, running the middle of the line out, the scrummaging positions, all that kind of stuff. But I think the two of them complement each other, so it's like anything. When you have the jersey, it's your job to try and keep it in the big games. And the nature of the game nowadays, Adrian, is there's 10, 12, 14 internationals in a year, so there's always going to be a bit of rotation, and a situation now where coaches can actually say, well, I'm just changing you. The guy that's coming in is very little difference, and you just got to accept that as a player, because you have to expose guys to the top games as well, not just for when you play the weaker nations.
You're disappointed to see Byrne not getting in the squad at all? I mean, I know you said that he actually couldn't come straight in.
I thought he might make the bench, but then you can argue and say, well, the reason Levy is there is because if Sean O'Brien doesn't, if something goes wrong, you just have a natural 7 to come straight in, and you have a fair bit of reshuffling if Tadhg Byrne is on the bench as the back rower. I know you switched Peter O'Mahony over, but you're doing a couple of switches then, so it's probably the right decision. And
is that something you might see going forward? Like, he either starts or he's not in the squad?
No, I think he's a brilliant option to have off the bench. Yeah. And because he's
fair enough. Yeah,
he's full of energy, so I don't think that's going to hurt him. I think it's going to be an added advantage of his versatility, particularly being picked and looking to go on a World Cup squad. Yeah,
all right. OTB AM is live, of course, with screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. We've had a bunch of comments coming in, and we've pretty cool prize as well, Quinny, for the best comment of the morning. Tommy's going to pick something out. They're going to win a VVIP pair of tickets for the roadshow at the Olympia next week.
Very nice.
The VVIP is best seats in the house.
VVIP.
Meet and greet with all the stars afterwards.
All the other stars.
The stars.
Yeah.
You'll be all right.
I'll be fine.
And access to the pre-show Q&A with yourself.
And what's the VIP?
VIP is all of that without the Q&A.
Pre-show.
Right, okay. So there is actual VIP tickets
There's
available.
legitimate VVIP and VIP.
Well, there you go.
And it's totally sold out.
Congratulations on your successes there, Adrian.
I don't know what that means, but some of the comments that are coming in here this morning, we're going to start with this one from Aaron Kelly on YouTube, who asks, does Quinny think, maybe we've just answered this one, but we'll go for it anyway. Does Quinny think we'll see Byrne on the bench next week against New Zealand? Also, England have picked a dangerous back three this week, and could they possibly cause an upset to New Zealand? I think, have we covered both of those?
Probably a little bit, yeah.
Virginian on Twitter says, it was once said about, this is about the Eddie Jones commentary, it was once said about Nick Faldo that he only ever opened his mouth to change feet. Jones is another perfect example. Dave Butler on Twitter, lads, the granddad not happy, forgot to get tickets for Tuesday. If there's any about, let us know. Is he in the mix, Tommy? Is he in the... Tommy's not committing one way or the other.
Shrugging the shoulders.
Yeah, he's not committing. Isold Cody on Twitter says, with Eddie Jones' bizarre selections and omissions, is he perhaps a tactical genius who will have an unusually uninjured group just on time for the Rugby World Cup, or is he just not caring as he realises he will be long gone?
I think he's trying to win matches as best he can, but you never know. We'll see, wait and see. I actually think they're going to be quite competitive tomorrow against New Zealand. I could be wrong. It could be egg in the face stuff. New Zealand possibly... They're capable of winning well, but I just think it'll be a bit of a slugfest there, and they'll make it difficult for New Zealand.
Yeah. Is there anything that's giving you hope from New Zealand's point of view? That are you seeing chinks in their armour, or is it more that England have that capacity?
I just think that I just think England have an ability. Like when you look at the team, like they have a very good backline. Like if their forwards do well enough and give them enough of ball, I think Slade is a really good player. Ashton, like him or not, is a super player. Elliot Daly at full back. So if they get enough of quality ball, Johnny May is so quick. I think the issues are up front. You know, Sam Underhill coming back in as a 7 is a really good player, and Brad Shields at 6. The New Zealand, he played under 20s for New Zealand. He knows all these guys inside out, and Itoje and Cruz are good players. So. A lot of variables there, you know. New Zealand could blow them away, but I don't know. I just think I don't think this New Zealand side are as good as people are making out to be.
Why so?
I think they have vulnerabilities, and South Africa exposed those vulnerabilities. If you go after them, and New Zealand have an aura, and to be fair, I don't want to be anyway disrespectful because I love watching them and I grew up watching them and I'm an All Black fan. I think you've got to believe that you can beat them first and foremost. England won't lack that confidence. Okay, they've got to go out and deliver then. But if you actually don't let them intimidate you, when I mean intimidate, physically knock you backwards, and like they hassle you and they harass teams because they're so energetic and so competitive in everything they do around, you know, when they have the ball or don't have the ball, and they really rely on kind of blowing teams away with the pace to do things. And if you can match that and maybe take it back to them a little bit and control the ball well and hold on to the ball, well, they're not really used to teams going at them a lot because they usually win the ball back. And if you make mistakes, they punish you. But South Africa didn't have a huge amount of possession in the game in Wellington, but they just had an ambition to attack them and put them in positions that maybe they weren't that used to. And they do panic and they give away a few penalties. And so I just think England, if they kind of, it's all ifs and buts, isn't it? South Africa should have beaten them in Cape Town, in South Africa as well. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see tomorrow and over the course of November what happens, particularly with us next week. But I could be very wrong. They could blow England away. But part of me thinks.
They might give them a rattle.
I kind of like the challenge for England because everyone's writing them off, and you know they weren't good over the summer in South Africa, but I just think they'll be a bit better tomorrow, and they'll get a lot from beating South Africa last week.
A lot of interest in Eddie Jones this morning. Markin to Rugby on Twitter says, do you think Eddie's just reflecting the eye of the media from his players to focus on the game? And James Kerwin, Eddie Jones needs to be quiet and focus on New Zealand. Cheap shots at Johnny Sexton will do nothing. Says James Kerwin on Twitter. Ryan Connolly says, just back from 10 years in London, also I can try and attend these events. I mean, that's bloody good commitment.
Back for 10 years, yeah. Tommy, who's you deciding, Tommy?
No, not picked. Not picked.
You can have a swaying opinion.
So, Dara O'Toole says, myself and the lads here are doing espresso shots for every phenomenal from Quinny. #OTBAM. I haven't heard any phenomenal this morning, I don't think. Are you hyped up to the gills? after? Have you sort of
maybe it's an illusion? I can't remember saying phenomenal. I do say it in commentary sometimes. So
we'll take a shot there anyway for one mention. You could just say the word about 10 times there and give him a heart attack if you want to.
That's right, yeah. Chris Heal, New Zealand will beat England by 20 plus. New Zealand will be pumped after most didn't play last week. Barrett McKenzie, Maunga on the bench. Too much for England. Ireland have a real chance the following week, where New Zealand will have to follow up. And Schmidt is a genius. He's covered a lot of bases there, has Chris Heal. England by 20 is the short story. You're not feeling the love on that when you're
I think they'll win, but I don't know, they'll win by 20. I hope England give them a rattle, because they'll shake them up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. A few injuries.
I don't want England to win, because if England win, then we've a wounded New Zealand.
They're never going to win. They're never going to lose back to back, is the point, isn't it?
Yeah, they come next week then.
Ed Burke is probably my favourite when it comes to these ticket asks. He just simply says, 2 tickets, please.
Keep it simple.
Pretty simple. Just before we wrap up in the Ireland game, Henshaw at 13 and Aki at 12 was one that sort of stood out to me. What's the thinking here?
Well, it's Gary Ringrose. He's Joe Schmidt's hand is kind of forced there. He's had a hip injury. He got a hip injury last week against Italy, and I think Ringrose gives a great attacking threat when he plays. And so Henshaw at 13 and Aki at 12 they were the centre partnership that started in the first test in Australia. And I think Robbie, to be fair, by his own admission, got a few timing issues wrong with defensively coming out of the line and stuff like that. He's a very intelligent player, and he's someone who's a superb player. I'm a massive fan of his. He learned from that pretty quickly and ended up being involved in the last test. And so I think they're great players, the two of them. I don't have any issues with them.
He's spoken a lot this week about 15, Robbie Henshaw.
Yeah, well, that's where he played a lot of his rugby before, and when he started with Connacht on the scene first, he was put back in as a full back, and he was brilliant. He's a superb footballer. So you're losing a little bit of that gliding kind of flair and real silky skills from Ringrose when he doesn't play. And I think if Ringrose is fit, he'll come back into the team, because he gives you an extra dimension attacking wise. But the two of them in midfield, defensively and competitively and physically, they're phenomenal. He can have another shot.
He's off the goofballs now at this stage.
He's bloody putting that in my head now. He's having a good effect in that one anyway.
Argentina, from the Argentina side, I've not heard anybody making a great case for Argentina this weekend, and they've had to shuffle things up in the pack a little bit, down to sort of third, fourth choice in the front row. And
the front row, giving them every chance in the Irish Times this morning.
The front row is the issue for them. I think their scrum has been poor in the rugby championship. And it's something that is normally a big strength for Argentina. But I think Mario Ledesma he's very passionate. He would have learned a lot in Australia. He took over from Daniel Hurtado over the summer on the back of a couple of bad results against Wales and Scotland. They were very good in the rugby championship. They beat South Africa at home and they beat Australia away. They should have beaten Australia in the last game as well. They had a massive lead. I think they were 35 or 34-8 up at one stage. Argentina or Australia came back and won that game. They're porous sometimes in defence, and they're not as organised and as strong defensively as I've seen them before. But certainly, I make no bones about it, they'll attack tomorrow and they will throw the ball around a bit, and they have some game breakers. Buffelli at the full back is a superb player. De La Fuente in the centre, the 12, massive, and Sanchez, of course, the fly half. He's been top quality performer for them, and I think this squad is probably, they'll be very well prepared because they're a completely home-based squad. There's no overseas players in it, and they've probably had 2 or 3 weeks back in Buenos Aires where they've been preparing for this. So they'll be pretty organised and have a game plan to try and be competitive. And you think if Argentina win this game, it's a lovely kind of springboard for them with this kind of new generation, new group. Yeah. There's a few new guys involved in the squad, so
a huge result for one of the most high-rated teams in the world.
Incredible passion, and they have to play France next week and then Scotland, so it'll give them a huge boost.
They beat Ireland, and that's success. It doesn't matter what happens after that.
Exactly. It takes a little bit of pressure away, and it makes it quite successful because Ireland are second-ranked team in the world now, and that's what they'll want to do. So I think Joe Schmidt and the players, they won't be under any illusion. I played against Argentina many times, and any of the guys, the Irish guys who have, no matter what or how good you view them or look at them, or the outside or publicly look at them, you're meeting an aggressive, passionate, intense, proud opposition, because they just love playing for their country, and that pride comes out in them, and it can make them hard to beat. So it'll be interesting to see.
Just on that rugby championship stuff, as I was saying, Toland, he's gone into the stats of their performances there, and he says that they were joint first overall in rucks won, second in defenders beaten, second in metres carried. They beat Australia's try scoring, and they beat New Zealand's discipline with no yellow cards. I suppose like the last one is you can take or leave it in terms of being a good place. Basically, Toland saying that they need to put us into a dark place at some point tomorrow, and then it'll be a success, especially if Ireland come away with the win.
Yeah, they have a few game breakers, and like I said, Buffelli and De La Fonte is a super player. Moyano, the winger, is brilliant as well. These guys tend to get a bit of space, and they exploit it, and they make a lot of line breaks. Their back row is superb. Matera, I think, is just a class player, and he played in that game in 2015 at the World Cup, and he was superb. I think Ortega, Decio as well, the number 8. Really good footballers, and the second rows, Alamano and Lavanini, they're strong, they're hard, and they get a lot of offloads. So I think a lot of their line breaks are coming from a real kind of open, relaxed attitude when they attack, and I don't think Ledesma will try and kind of stop them from playing that way. What he will want from is to be stronger defensively and be organised, because that was their problem in the Rugby Championship. They didn't have a problem scoring 2, 3 tries, 4 tries a game, but it was what they were conceding was the problem. So I think Ireland probably be maybe that little bit better than them tomorrow and more organised than them, I hope. I think we shouldn't expect from miracles in a clinical performance, because you're putting a group together who haven't played in a while. But it's
knock some of the rust off and get
a
the
little
result
bit,
done.
and they'll have to be physically right for Argentina. And you think back to the game last year, we were 20 points up and very comfortable, and then Argentina had us, in all sorts of panic near the end of the game, and they have that ability to do that.
Jared Fitzpatrick on YouTube wonders, does Quincy think that the new Alternative Ireland kit is an homage to Leinster? Blue heart.
Homage to Leinster, Jesus.
Go on, Quinny, bite on that one.
Paying too much attention to it.
No.
Show me the new kit, Tommy. Can you put it up there?
Can we get the Ireland? Can we get it?
The new Ireland kit.
The Alternative Ireland kit.
The alternative one.
I'll read a couple of comments here. We're doing that, including giving away the pair of tickets for Tuesday night. Have gone to drumroll Sbrook73 on Twitter. Essentially, it was a begging tweet looking for the tickets, so we said fair enough, that works. They won the VVIP tickets to the sold out roadshow in the Olympia next Tuesday night. It's going to be pretty epic. Keith Wood is going to be there, Quincy is going to be there, Brian O'Driscoll is going to be there, Justin Marshall and Paul O'Connell as well, and those VVIP tickets are winging your way to you. Sbrook73. You can check out HeinekenRugbyClub.com for more chances to win on that as well. Tommy is feverishly trying to get us that clip.
I'm looking forward to that
picture.
It's a good Munster representation at that roadshow.
Well, I'm interested in
and despite my Connacht bias, obviously,
I'm interested in hearing what they have to say. I'm going to be asking a few questions.
Bit of prodding, a bit of poking, and
you've 4 egomaniacs there.
Oh, really? Yeah. Joe Malloy, is that? You didn't include Joe Malloy in that.
I'm joking, but top quality performers, and it'll be interesting to see what Justin Marshall has to say about the game and stuff like that.
Yeah, interesting guy actually. His punditry is pretty good.
He's good. He gets people question his confidence, and he lacks a bit of confidence at times, doesn't
he? Typical Kiwi, is that what that's?
Yeah, but he's good. He's very good in fairness, and he was a hell of a player as well.
Yeah,
it's good to have him.
Class act. Here we go. All right, here's the homage to Leinster. Fair point.
Yeah, maybe they could bring out another one in red. The Vodafone, the RFU on it.
But that's enough.
A green one actually for you, Connacht.
Too much red, Conrad. The green one's already been...
Connacht one, isn't he?
Well, it is an homage to Connacht, I said, the Ireland jersey.
But a darker green kind of for Adrian.
Go out of that. Keith Wood, Malcolm O'Kelly, Dennis Leamy are all going to be on tonight to preview the Ireland versus Argentina game as well. Friday night racing with trainer Tony Martin. Andy Lee is going to be in to discuss his acclaimed biography, and a really good chat with Andy and his biographer Niall Kelly from the book launch down in Limerick this week in O'Mahony's bookstore. You can check that out. Neil Tracy was in the driving seat down there during the week. That's full piece and well worth a watch up on youtube.com/offtheball. It is pretty much it from us this morning. You can search for all of our good stuff on all of your usual podcast providers, and now up on Spotify as well, on OTB AM on Spotify. This is an offshoot of Web Summit. We came back with all these. The lads were on a junket at Web Summit during the week. Did you know that?
I heard.
Went to a Champions League game.
I was watching some
Went to a Champions League game as well.
It's a shoehorning of humour in around the Web Summit, which has probably been the low point of my week, to be quite honest with you.
Right.
Humour in giant inverted commas.
In giant inverted commas.
All the best stuff up on offtheball.com or on our YouTube channel. Congrats to our winner, Brooke73. That's what's coming up in the show tonight, and a brilliant lineup, of course, on Tuesday night as well. So we'll be in touch with you more about all of that good stuff, and more opportunities to win tickets to Tuesday night as well on tonight's show on Off the Ball, and again as well over the weekend and right here on OTB AM on Monday morning. So that is pretty much it from us for this morning. Delighted to have you along with us. Before the minute, good luck.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.